The holidays are naturally a time to reflect. With American Thanksgiving in the rearview mirror, it's time to start being honest. And on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, 5 inconvenient truths as to why Edmonton is struggling.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Friday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This is my 10th season doing digital hockey content, my third as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And I want to thank everyone that has helped make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you'll excuse me, my breathing will be a little erratic today. My nose is stuffy beyond belief, but we are going to do our best to power through. So on today's show, we are going to break down these 5 inconvenient truths into our typical 3 segments. To start out, first segment, we will talk about the 2 signings that have just flat out not worked to plan. Second, we'll talk about the goaltending. In our second segment, we will talk about Brett Kulak struggling about as bad as anyone can and still get to play. Then we'll talk about the Oilers' limited liquidity to fix their problems and why they might keep recurring. And then to wrap up the show, we will talk about the accumulation of miles and why the Oilers are looking to do something that has only happened one time in the history of the NHL as a league. So to start out, free agency, trades, the draft, those are opportunities to get an understanding of your general manager and your organization at large's priorities. The types of players they choose to acquire often tell you a lot about what they think their team lacks. Coming out of last year against the Panthers in another Stanley Cup Final appearance where the Oilers struggled to score and their defense broke down and their goaltending couldn't steal them any games, the Oilers looked at their problem and said, we need to be grittier. We need to be nastier. And I don't necessarily want to judge whether or not that was the right takeaway. I think that's a different conversation. But in choosing to trade for and then ultimately extend Trent Frederick to the contract they did, that tells you something about what the Oilers thought they needed. In choosing to sign Andrew Mangiapane and choosing to go away from Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson type players who didn't fit particularly well with what Chris Knoblauch wanted from the team last year, but at the same time, they still put up decent counting stats. And the insistence on traits over production is not a uniquely Edmonton or Stan Bowman problem. I think pretty much every fan base around the league will tell you their GM at various points, one or another, has gone a little crazy. Look at what the Leafs have done with some of the guys they brought in. Think about the various guys Chris Drury's brought into the Rangers, what the Panthers were doing prior to finding the right mix of guys presently. It is a real challenge to find the exact right mix of talent. And because it's so hard to accumulate a lot of talent, because this is a salary cap league, teams often choose to try and shortcut their way to where they're trying to go effectively by utilizing intangibles that don't necessarily show up in the box score, but have a funny way of mattering in close games. But I'm at this point, I know it's early. I know it's only November 28th. At this point, I'm ready to chalk up the entire Trent Frederick contract as a loss. I know we're not even 1 year into a 7-year contract, but through 25 games, Trent Frederick has 2 points. 2 points. He is playing 12 minutes per game. Trent Frederick looks like a total non-factor. And something that irks me about this, and I really wanted this to work. If you'll remember, back in September, my everydayers know, we did an entire episode arguing maybe there's more there. He was boxed out in Boston. There wasn't really a path to a top 6 role. Maybe Edmonton has a way to get more out of him. And the further removed he gets from that ankle injury, the more likely it is his speed comes back and he starts being able to put himself in better positions. But the problem at large here, and I'm pulling up the stats now, through 25 games, Trent Frederick has 63 hits. 63. In 6 games, Zach Hyman has 22. And I understand Zach Hyman is just a better hockey player and he gets to play more. He has more opportunities. And his role puts him in a position where he has the impetus to have free reign. He can do almost whatever he wants in those situations because he's got a lot of credibility banked up. And 22 hits in 6 games, and Trent Frederick has 60-something in 25. Doesn't take you long to see Zach Hyman's going to end up passing Trent Frederick. And Trent Frederick was brought in, at least in theory, to supplement some of that, to give the lineup more teeth, to give it more jam throughout the lineup. And I know I wasn't exactly, I'm not an ardent Evander Kane supporter. I don't think giving the contract the Kings gave Corey Perry would have been a particularly good idea either, but the Oilers needed to replace some of that intangible grit that they lost in the offseason. They needed to replace some goal scoring that they lost in the offseason. And right now, as we sit here, they haven't done it either. And then as for Mangiapane, this one kind of stings because I've always been a Mangiapane guy. I like his game a lot. He's not working. Just straight up, he is not working for what the Oilers thought he could do. He had 2 goals the first few weeks of the season and has become effectively a non-factor. His minutes have been trending downward ever since the second, third week of the season when, coincidentally, Jack Roslovic showed up and forced his way into the top 6. But those 2 players flopping, just outright flopping, not being mediocre, flopping, misevaluations, player not performing, about as rough an outcome as you can have. And the reason I wanted to start there, and we're going to get to the goaltending in a second, this is all connected. When you only have so much money to spend, you have to be tactical in your decisions and you can't afford misses. And that brings us to our goaltending, because we heard it over and over again from sourced reporting. Stan Bowman doesn't feel like any of the goalies they could acquire in free agency or trade would be that much of an improvement on Stuart Skinner, so they couldn't justify the payment. And they said, well, we're going to improve the team in front of him. We're going to have Frederick. We're going to have Mangiapane. We are going to build a more well-rounded team, and you've got Savoy, you've got Howard, and that's going to lead us where we want to go. But through the 25 games the Oilers have played this year, they have goaltending comparable to their inaugural NHL season, 1979-1980. This team is getting as bad of goaltending as possible, and the justification for it was the upgrades that are out there, like John Gibson, Alex Lyon, or if you really wanted to do like an Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, whatever goalie is in the back of your mind when I say they could have gone out and got a goalie. They chose Trent Frederick. They chose Andrew Mangiapane, and that's why they're in this situation right now. They thought they could put the clothes back on the emperor, and that's what this situation is. The Oilers' goaltending situation is an emperor has no clothes. We all know this is not working. The Oilers are going to keep telling us we think they'll turn it around. We trust them. We believe in them because they have to say the right things. But at a certain point, you are what you are, and Pickard is barely an NHL backup, and Stuart Skinner is probably an NHL backup. Neither guy has played particularly well other than the odd game here or there. And the rumor mill is abound with opportunities out there. There are plenty of goalies that could be had. You don't want any of them. Do you want Tristan Jari? Like, do you really want to bring Tristan Jari in here after you've seen how the last 4 or 5 years with the Penguins have gone? I can't see that being something I'd be excited about. Jordan Binnington, he's good for 1 month of season. He was good in the Four Nations last year, but look at his numbers right now. Jordan Binnington's numbers are horrendous. But we're going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, I'm going to tell you why Brett Kulak torpedoing and the Oilers' lack of cap space and liquidity of assets has them in between a rock and a hard place. Let's be honest. Most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can leave meaning money on the table. That's why Monarch is so helpful. Monarch is an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or phone. Monarch helps you organize your accounts, track your spending, and get a better handle on investments, and you will never, ever touch a spreadsheet. I love that Monarch can let you look at shared financial goals with a significant other, set financial goals, and make better investment decisions together. Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where your money's going and how to make it work harder for you. Do not let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you so much to everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day, and everyone that has helped make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So, continuing down our list of 5 inconvenient truths, as much as it is a player issue, and as much as it is a roster issue, I also think, and we're going to get to the liquidity and the Brett Kulak of it all in a minute, I just think the vibes are atrocious. And this isn't one of the truths. This is just an aside before we talk about Brett Kulak. The vibes are not great around this team. Everybody kind of feels like they are just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. There hasn't really been a seize the reins, take the bull by the horns moment here where someone has single-handedly quelled the storm. And this is a team sport. As much as I like what Connor Clattenburg brings and McDavid and Draisaitl are doing their best, you need a lot more than just 2 or 3 guys going all at once to make this happen. You need you need as close to 18 skaters and your goalie as you possibly can going at once to give yourself a chance to win consistently. But as for Brett Kulak, he has been outscored 11-24. The Oilers are getting 31% of the goals in Brett Kulak's minutes. And his minutes are down from 2032 last year to 1744. So the Oilers identified this. Some of that has just been him getting faded on the penalty kill and making his workload lighter, but he is still getting absolutely thumped at 5-on-5. And his underlying numbers are not great. 48% scoring chances, 49 shots on goal, 45 expected goals, 43 high danger. All of that tells you that this is an extreme outlier. Like, he should be getting better goaltending, and that would make his overall numbers better. But when somebody who doesn't come out of your lineup is getting pelted to the tune of 2-1 in goals, you're not going to win. And it's unfortunate. The Oilers really got a lot of good hockey out of Brett Kulak in the first half of last year before they had traded for Jake Wallman. He was playing the most minutes he'd ever played on a nightly basis last year. And it really is an uncomfortable and an awkward situation to be in because this is a guy who's been here a while. This is a guy who's got a long track record of NHL experience and being a pretty solid third-pair NHL defenseman. But is it fair to say this could be the end of the line? And not just in terms of being an Oiler, but at his age, it's not out of the question he's taken a step back, and this is where he's at skill set wise. And that's the thing with age-related decline. For the most part, it doesn't happen all at once. We are talking about granular changes where you're not as explosive, you're not as good laterally. Whatever it happens to be that fades from your game, that inhibits your ability to play the way you used to. Brett Kulak's been awful this year, and some of it, I think, is a product of the revolving door of rotating partners. With Emerson, they've outscored opponents 10-9, but everyone else, they've been outscored 5-1 when he plays with Regula, 3-0 with Nurse, 3-0 with Wallman. And Kulak's the guy, if you recall, that last year, in the first 2.5 rounds of the playoffs before Ekholm came back, Kulak was playing on the first pair with Evan Bouchard, and they were smoking people. So we're not that far removed from good Brett Kulak hockey, but at the same time, he is getting obliterated right now. And the Oilers don't have guys in the system that can fill that role. If the Oilers are going to swing a trade, there's a good chance Brett Kulak is going out because of his money. And that is a natural segue to the Oilers don't have a lot of cards to play here. The Oilers are in a weird spot where they are over-leveraged for this exact moment. They have given out a ton of contracts over the last 12 months. They've given out extensions. They've brought new guys into the fold. And the following players have full no movement clauses. Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Trent Frederick, Adam Henrique, Jack Roslovic, Darnell Nurse, Matthias Ekholm, Jake Wallman. All of those guys cannot be moved unless the Oilers ask them to. Of course, most of those guys you're not going to ask because they are positives for your team. They're helping you out. Andrew Mangiapane and Trent and Matthias Janmark have no trade protection where you could put them on waivers. But is anyone going to claim Mangiapane? Is anyone going to claim Janmark? Janmark, maybe. He doesn't make a lot. But with minimal liquidity, you don't have a lot of cards to play for Stan Bowman to try and spice things up here. That's why if you follow the speculation, the rumor mill, a lot of the conversation is, well, they're going to send out Skinner to replace him because they can't afford to have both goalies making the money they do because they don't have the space. Right now, the Oilers have, I want to say, $100,000 in cap space, and they fundamentally do not have the liquidity to make more space. They would need to get somebody like Henrique, like Darnell Nurse. Those are really, and maybe Ekholm, but those are the only guys making enough money that if you were able to get them out, you would have liquidity to make an important move. And they only don't have their first round pick this year. They used that in the Wallman trade last year, but they have enough draft picks where they could go out and get someone, but because they don't have the cap space, it has become a real challenge. And then the last part of this conversation before we take our second and final break of the show, the Oilers need to stay competitive right now. They are leveraged for this moment and this moment alone. They cannot take a mulligan. They cannot say, well, we'll be back next year. We need to reset. We need to no. You need to make something happen now. And everyone else knows that. That's the other component of this that's a little awkward. Everybody else around the league knows the Oilers need a goalie. So even if the Penguins put Tristan Jari on waivers last year and no one claimed him, well, now you need a goalie, so you're going to give us something for him. Or Alex Lyon, or Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, or Devin Levy, or Jacob Dobashev, or Jonathan Quick. Whatever goalie that comes to mind when I say replace Stuart Skinner, everybody knows you need a goalie now. Everybody knows you're desperate and you have McDavid for this short window, and there's still enough time this year that if you turn it around, you could start to make something happen. But being that everyone knows you need something, they're going to drive you a harder bargain. Because everyone knows you don't have a ton of liquidity, they're going to charge you more. They're going to make it more difficult for you to get good value, and you should. That's good negotiating if you're trading with the Oilers. You want to make Stan Bowman play his cards and then make a decision one way or another on what you're going to do. The Oilers do not have a lot of recourses. I suppose you could fire Chris Knobloch, but I don't think Pete DeBoer coming in here is going to change anything all that much. Maybe they score a little bit more, but this is a personnel issue. They're getting 1980 caliber goaltending. They're one of their most consistent lineup staples on the back end is getting outscored 2-1. Those two things in conjunction alone, I understand why things aren't going so well. We are going to take our second and final break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, we'll talk about history and why the Oilers are looking to replicate something that's only happened one time in the history of the NHL. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game, or if you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to huge fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Tonight in the NBA, a couple decent games. You can watch Wemby and the Spurs take on the Nuggets, where the Nuggets are 7.5-point favorites, but you get the Luka revenge game. The Lakers, 10-point home favorites for the Mavericks. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. So head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you so much to everyone that is hanging out on this Friday edition of Locked On Oilers. And going into the weekend, the future is not yet written. Just because what has already happened has happened doesn't mean you don't get to do anything. And that type of mindset is an essential component of success in sports. When you play 82 games year after year after year, you are going to fail. You are going to lose. You are going to have miserably bad nights. And it is an integral component of the athlete's psyche that losing in competition does not deter you. You want to play with no fear and no concern. And right now, the Oilers are a skittish hockey team. They are a team waiting for something to go wrong. And when you are fighting it to the degree the Oilers are, sometimes it takes something by accident going your way. And when you are struggling to the degree the Oilers are, sometimes the good stuff does feel like accidents, that you don't get to get good things. And I don't feel that the Oilers are terribly far away, but they aren't making progress, which is why it feels like it is actually kind of far. They are in a lot of games. They have spent a ton of their games down one or tied or up by one, and then they have found a way to lose that game. But in being in those games, it means you're having opportunities. Like Pacino says, in any given Sunday, there are inches all around you waiting for it, and you got to claw and you got to fight. And all of those inches, those small sequences, those are the difference between winning and losing. And when you are struggling to the degree the Oilers are, you don't have the resolve, the mettle to win those inches. And the more of those inches you lose, the more games you're going to lose. And I do think it's important to talk about this. And I went and looked this up. So in the 100-ish years we've had in NHL, one team in the history of the league has gone to 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals, lost the first 2 times, and then won the 3rd time. That was the Detroit Red Wings during World War II. 1941 to 1943, they won the last time. They went to 3 straight finals. That is another planet. That is replacement players during a world war that fulfilled that responsibility for Detroit, that won that 3rd cup in the 3rd time. And sustained greatness is so difficult. It's why we revere the Brady and Belichick Patriots, the Duncan Parker Ginobili Spurs. You need so much to go right just to make a finals, and then to get there over and over and again over a 15, 20-year window, and to win multiple times. It really puts in context why those teams are so great and why we deify greatness, why Michael Jordan is still, even though LeBron has surpassed him in a lot of statistics, you ask a lot of people who you got game for your life, they're going to take Michael Jordan because he went to the finals 6 times and he won all 6 of them. That matters to people. And the Oilers, and I hate to do equivocation here, the Oilers have made 2 straight finals after a decade where they made the playoffs once between 2010 and 2020. The real playoffs, because we're not counting the 2020 bubble playoffs. But when you only make the playoffs once in 10 years, and then the next decade you go to 2 finals, 3 conference finals, you're in the playoffs consistently, I get it. Coming this close and losing and walking away with nothing sucks. It is miserable. It is as painful as it gets because it doesn't take that much more. And unfortunately, and we said this a lot of the summer, more likely than not, the Oilers weren't getting back to a 3rd straight final because that just doesn't happen. And like I told you, I went and did the research. It's happened one time in the history of the league where a team has made it 3 straight times and only won the 3rd time. This team has so many miles on the odometer. This is a veteran-laden team of guys in their late 20s and early 30s who have played hundreds of games, who have played hundreds of playoff games. And over the last 3 years, the Oilers have played an extra season's worth of games when you add in the postseason. So, yeah, this is hard. This is challenging. And in spite of all of that, this is a group that people still expect a lot from. And that pressure is a privilege. The opportunity to prove people wrong to some degree, I know is a powerful motivating factor. I don't know if we'll ever get to the no one believes in us team aspect here, but I just want to see the Oilers start to make progress. That's the big key here because they're not far away in the individual games, but when you add up the game after game after game of finding a way to lose in stupid ways, at a certain point when you keep losing, you're a losing hockey team. And the Oilers are not making progress right now, and it doesn't feel like they're really making headway in solving their problems. And even if you swap out Skinner for another goalie, you swap out Pickard for another backup, you get Kulak out and you bring in a new third pair lefty. Making the moves doesn't guarantee it's going to work. And look, you should make the move. You should never tolerate complacency. You should never stay with something that's not working. But just because you change things doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be better. But you should still try. That's the key here. Trying and failing is better than not trying at all. Because right now, what the Oilers are doing is not working. Unequivocally, it is not working. You go out there and you get a new goalie in here. And I am not going to pound the desk and say, oh boy, Tristan Jari. I'm not. I have watched Tristan Jari be a middling goalie for quite a while now. He is pretty far removed from the best hockey he's played in his career. He went to the AHL for a good stretch of last season to work out his problems. And as goalie star of the league as this is, nobody thought twice about claiming him on waivers. His contract is awful. Maybe you convince the Penguins to take Skinner back and you give picks or whatever to make the money a little more palatable. But I'm not banking on Tristan Jari coming in here and saving them. He's not that good. I know the Penguins are off to a nice start. It's a good story, all that. Tristan Jari does not move me. Hell, even if the Oilers went out and got UC Saros or Ilya Sorokin, I probably wouldn't be that moved because the team around them has struggled so much this year. But with all of that said, the Oilers still have time. Until they don't, but for now, they still have time. That'll do it for today's show. Thank you so much to everybody that made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network where we've got your team covered every single day. Be sure to check out Locked On NHL Game Night where the guys are breaking down every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned in June. Everyone have a safe and fun weekend. I will talk to you guys on Monday. Until then, let's go Oilers.